Okay, this week we're talking about behavioral characteristics of autism and the things that I observed. Um, so we're going to start with anxiety. One of the first things that I noticed is we went back to school. We've been in school for a full week and a week and a day, actually. And one of the things that I noticed is when we went back to school, my students' schedules were not set yet. Some of my students showed up to school the first day and they didn't have a schedule. They didn't have anywhere to go. They walked onto campus, and luckily I was walking around and was able to find them. Um, Huge amounts of anxiety, huge amounts of stress, question after question. I don't know where to go. I don't know what I'm doing. No, no, it's okay. You found me. I can help you find where we're supposed to go. So follow me. But Mrs. Snyder, I don't know where to go. I don't know what I'm doing. Um, and, all I could think is that luckily I was there to help them, or that hopefully somebody would have been there to help them because they literally showed up to school the first day with no agenda, nowhere to go. And I feel like that anxiety followed them throughout the day. One of my students, unfortunately, was not paired up with a paraeducator to get to the bus, and he missed the bus. This is the same student that came to school and didn't have any place to go. So these situations are unfortunate because, the behavioral characteristic is that they're used to structure. They're used to a certain thing. And these were I've had the privilege of going from the middle school, which I was with eighth graders, teaching eighth graders, and now I'm at the high school that these eighth graders filtered into. So I'm able to help these ninth graders now that are in a new environment and in a new school. And unfortunately, the school wasn't most organized, which seems to be typical. And these poor students just had huge anxiety from not knowing where to go. So welcome back to school. Does not interact with others. So as I was walking around campus this first week, I began to notice very quickly that my special education students that were ninth graders were out of place. They would go eat their lunches and then they would have no clue where to go, what to do. Traditionally, if you look at our campus, all the kids are sitting around in the shade because it's so hot right now. And my students were just wandering and wandering and wandering. So I took it upon myself to be like, okay, well, these kids need some place to go where they feel comfortable. So I opened up my classroom to them, bought some Uno cards so that I could still have a little bit of peace, and allowed these students, I let them know on, I think it was Tuesday, that they could come into my classroom and they could play Uno and they could hang out with their peers and have a comfortable environment where they were able to interact with others. When they were outside, they literally looked lost. And what was very interesting to me is that there were a couple of them that have, there were a couple of them on the spectrum, a couple of them with ASD. So what was interesting to me is that even though they spent all last year together, they were wandering still. They were in a new environment. They weren't interacting with those students that they knew from last year. It wasn't until I pulled them into my classroom and said, here's a deck of Uno cards. Let's play Uno. I played with them for the first 2 days and got them back into their normal environment. And they started hanging out with their friends again and started interacting with their friends again. So it was very interesting to see that at first they did not want to interact with others, even people that they knew from last year. Does not do well with change, okay? So, like I said, our school doesn't have all their schedules together correctly, and they're quite possibly we're still trying to make sure that all the students have their proper services, and sometimes that means that schedules change and things happen. And this week I observed a young lady who got moved into my classroom. Now, I don't know this young lady very well. She was not one of my 8th graders last year. She's actually an upperclassman. I think she might be an 11th grader. But she got moved into my study skills class. And it took her 3 days so far to try to switch the 2 classes that got moved. She kept going back to the original schedule, the one that she had had. They had switched her PE class, her Spanish class, and she received my study skills class instead. So she dropped Spanish, doesn't have Spanish anymore. They switched her PE period, and then she was given my study skills class. And even though she had the paper, and even though her case manager had spoken with her, and even though her case manager had walked her to her classes, she came to me the next day and was like, I was just in Spanish. And my teacher said hi to me. So do I keep going to Spanish? And I'm like, no, you were not supposed to be in Spanish. Let me see your schedule. And so I went over her schedule with her, and I showed her, this is, I crossed off stuff and showed her how it went. Well, the next day, she showed up to my class a whole class period early. And I had to tell her, no, you're in my 7th period class, not my 6th period class. Well, where am I supposed to be right now? I used to have Spanish. And so no, I had to tell her, no. So there was thorough instruction given, I think, multiple times, but when you're a person with autism, you have this routine, and this was the routine that she had set in her head. She didn't want to change it. She did not want to move on from it. And it was just interesting to watch how set she was, even though, because I had asked her, do you want to stay in your Spanish class? And she said, no, it's hard. And I said, okay, so stop going to Spanish and start coming to my class. And so it's just interesting that routine was so set in her mind. Like, that was how it was going to be. It wasn't going to be any other way. She had her schedule from the first day of school, and it was not going to change. And unfortunately, when the schools don't have all the information that they need, or maybe miss something, that's where my job as a case manager is to go report, hey, my student's missing services, we need to switch classes. And as we're a week into school, I can understand how difficult that is going to be for the 10 students that I had to send an email in and say, these students are all missing services. So we try our best. We do our best to help them. I know I'm going to go in and check on them next week and say, hey, did you get a new schedule yet? If you did, let's talk about it. Let's figure this out. Are you okay with it? Just making sure that we help them adjust to the change as much as we possibly can. Many of them will be frustrated. They will be annoyed. They might get that anxiety. They might not want to go, but we have to help support them to be able to handle change and to deal with it to the best of their ability.